Hi everyone, this is Joanna Mick with Health Empowerment Center, and this is my first book review here on YouTube for my Health Empowerment book review. As I said, this channel is about kind of reading some health books, self-help books that I've read, and I'd like to share with you kind of the summary of what the books are about and my take on them, kind of my opinion, things that I took away for myself and that might be helpful to you. And maybe, you might say, well, maybe I should check out that book and get a little bit more understanding of what it's all about and see if it's something maybe I can utilize for my health and wellness, or maybe discuss it with my primary care physician, because you should always talk with your primary health care physician in accordance to your care and make sure everything is in alignment so that you both are on the same page as you take care of your health and wellness, because you're a team, right? And if you always have any questions or, would like to suggest a book to me, I would love for you to send that to me here in the comments in YouTube, or you can check me out on Facebook. I'm there as Health Empowerment Coach. I have a group page there, or you can check me out on Facebook on my page there as well. The books that I'm going to kind of talk about today, I kind of put them together because to me they kind of go together. It's Eat Right for Your Type and Live Right for Your Type by Dr. Peter J. D'Adamo, and he's a naturopathic physician. His father was as well, and his father kind of began the work on the blood type diet, and he expanded upon it as he became a naturopath, and he started doing research on it. He worked with Bridgeport University, expanding upon it. So I will tell you that in these books, the food lists that are in there are actually a little bit outdated from his research. So I utilize his app on my phone to kind of get an updated version of the foods based upon the blood type. Now, so let's kind of go into each of these books and what I loved about each one of them and what was the takeaway. And just kind of an understanding of how important these books became to me is because these were kind of the foundation of what led me into going into natural medicine and then into Chinese medicine. It was kind of the kickoff. I was thinking, hey, I'm getting old. I was 28 years old, and I had chronic pain. I had issues with my menstrual cycles. I had chronic migraines and headaches, and I was slightly overweight. I've never been high overweight, but I was slightly overweight, and I was kind of in a depressed state most of my 20s. I didn't have a whole lot of energy, so I really was kind of thinking, I'm about to be 30 and I'm already falling apart and not feeling like I should be feeling. And so, we're always taught to, I need to diet and exercise and da-da-da-da-da, because that's what we're supposed to do. And it's true. That is our foundation. That's our part of our health care, is taking care of our exercise, what we eat, and how we deal with stress. That's in our ballpark, but we don't know, right? So we have to kind of, in a sense, we're just kind of left to figure it out on our own. And thankfully, there are people like myself that are moving into the health coaching industry to really bring knowledge to our clients on how can you get the right nutrition for yourself, the right fitness, the right stress management for your health and well-being. So I started doing my own little research, trying all these different diets. I had tried Weight Watchers. Unfortunately, that did not work for me. I was tired all the time and hungry all the time. The only thing I kind of got out of that diet was how to portion control. Other than that, it was not the diet for me. So then I tried some other crazy diets. But I remember when this book came out, Eat Right for Your Type, back in 1996, my grandfather had got a hold of it and actually followed this diet and got off all of his medications and got down to his goal weight. Sadly, because it's considered, in our mindset, diets are temporary and you go back to eating, let's go quote unquote normal, and all that stuff came back. So it was in my mind, hey, so I finally was like, well, let's go ahead and give this one a try. Let's check it out. So I read the book and I was like, this sounds interesting. And I decided to follow this diet. And so I did for 14 weeks. I followed it strictly. And all my pains went away. My menstrual cycles it was night and day. Migraines gone, energy's up, and I'm like flying, running. And it was like game changer. No mood swings, nothing. It was like, whoa, what is up with this? I was like, what is up with this? This is crazy. So what's the book about? So Eat Right for Your Type, and then I'm going to talk about Live Right for Your Type. Eat Right for Your Type is about, the foods that are compatible with your blood type. So we have 4 main blood types. That's O, A, B, and B. Those are the 4 blood types, and each one kind of has a heritage or a lineage, you could say. And so he kind of speaks to, what was their background. And so O's tend to be the hunter-gatherer types. The B's are more of the nomads or the herders. The A's are your fishermen and your farmers. And the AB is kind of a combination of those 2 last blood groups because of the movement of people over time. So we've got, our transportation systems have got up, so the ability to move from region to region has become more prevalent. And so we've been able to cross over blood types. And so, and what is those different blood types, it was based upon where they were, how they lived, on what types of foods they had access to, and their bodies adapted to those food sources. So again, farmer fishermen, it's going to be, what are they going to be eating? Things that are kind of readily available to them on the farm or if they're fishing. So fish, poultry, fruits and vegetables. Whole grains were kind of the big part of their diet. A hunter-gatherers, things that they could hunt out in the forest and gather from the forest. So a lot of their foods tend to be leafy greens, red meats, nuts and seeds, berries. Not a whole lot of grains were readily available to them, so they don't do as well with grains. And I'm an O blood type person, and I found that to be the case. I don't do well with grains, so I have to kind of modify that for me. And so that's kind of his take in this book, and he kind of explains why the different blood types. And then he gets into what's known as lectins. And now lectins are a protein found in foods, and they're very specific to a blood type. Now, not all. There are some lectins that are not so specific. They use a different, what's called a receptor on the cells, and these lectins are known as, in scientific definition, as sugar-binding proteins. And that means they bind to sugar, and a lot of our receptors on our cells are made of sugars. That's the antenna, is the sugar molecule. And how they're constructed on the exterior of the cell. And our blood markers, our blood type markers are glycoproteins, and the sugar part is out. And so these lectins can attach to them and cause what's called a glutination or clumping of the cells. So they'll kind of grab some over here and this one over here, and they'll stick them together. And what happens is these cells are now kind of gooped together, and the body's like, what is this? And again, our blood marker is telling the body it's me. And that's why it's very important when you're having a blood transfusion that you get a blood cell that's compatible to your blood type. So again, A's and B's really have to have A and B blood type. They can have O's because the markers are enough to where it's not going to overshadow it, based on the sugar molecules. So what happens is if you eat a food that has these lectins that likes your blood marker, it causes agglutination, which causes inflammation and can wreak havoc in your system, causing inflammation, because inflammation causes the body to attack itself and try to clean it up, because it doesn't see it as self anymore. It's kind of covering up that molecule, and the body's like, I don't know who you are anymore. Who are you? And it goes and it takes it off. So that's kind of the concept behind part of what he explains here in Eat Right for Your Type. Now, outside of that, so that's one way the food can interact with you and that determine if that food is right for you or not. Another is, do you have the digestive enzymes sufficient enough to digest your food? So an O blood type person he speaks of tends to be lactose intolerant because their lactase production is not very high, because they didn't have a lot of dairy in their diet over time, so their body adapted away from using lactase, other than when during breastfeeding and things like that. But the need for lactose became less, and so there wasn't a bunch of lactose in the diet, so lactase wasn't necessary. It adapted down, so most O blood type people don't produce enough lactase to digest dairy, and so they end up having what's known as lactose intolerance. And so they end up, if they eat dairy, have a lot of GI issues sometimes. And I love me some ice cream, but I limit it from time to time. And this can happen also with A's. They can usually produce some lactase more than O's, and so they can handle a little bit more dairy in their diet. B's, because they were herders, they had the cattle, they had the goats, and so dairy was a pretty predominant part of their diet, and so their ability to make lactose or lactase, which is the enzyme to digest lactose, was more prevalent, and so they tend to produce it. And most bees tend to have an ability to digest milk. So that's kind of the concept in the blood type diet, is the adaptations of the body in creating the enzymes to digest the food that was prevalent in their diet at that time. Now, one thing I learned from this, and this was my takeaway from following the diet and reading and understanding, he also talks about how do you notice the inflammation in the body from all the different types of body responses like acid reflux and discomfort in the gut, the issues with pain, inflammation, again, throughout the system, is signs that the body doesn't really, it can't digest the food and assimilate it appropriately. So anyway, so what I found over time is that, we are not 100% to our blood type necessarily into what his suggestions are. That's the majority, but we're, just as the A's and B blood groups have crossed over from moving, we also have 4 generations of genetics, which can also play a role in how our body creates enzymes and interacts with our food. And so we can sometimes have some issues that maybe stem from if you have a parent or a grandparent that's of a different blood type. So you can have some of their genetic pool in you that can have some susceptibility. So like for myself, I learned that though he recommends that peppers and tomatoes are good for O blood type people and not good for A's, my grandmother is an A blood type and I can't eat those things. They cause me a bad acid reflux, and so it's not a food I can eat even though my blood type is O. And so I learned from this diet, overall, this was my takeaway from Eat Right for Your Type, is that it's a starting point for individualized dieting and nutrition, because we are all individuals of several generations of genetics and history that makes us unique. And so we have to understand, how do I listen to my body to understand its needs? Because the goal for health and wellness is to reduce inflammation in the system, which can lead to chronic conditions. And so being able to listen and know and understand the body is very important to our health and wellness. And so that's my big takeaway for Eat Right for Your Type, is understanding this is the start of individualized nutrition, as it says right here, individualized. And so this is giving for 4 different blood types, but we can say there's a whole lot more than that going on in there. So it's a good starting point to learn how to listen to your body and to nourish it appropriately. So let's go to the other book. So Live Right for Your Type actually has pretty much the Eat Right for Your Type in it, but he goes a little bit more in depth into, like it says, metabolism, vitality of every stage of life. But he gets into more of like the exercise piece of the blood type and how your body responds to stress, because that's really important. And I've seen it, and it's really kind of flabbergasted me when I could see the difference in how we move can affect our health and wellness and our cortisol response, really. And so he gets into that more stress response. And so, and that's what I really love about this one, is that he talks about how our body responds to exercise, how it responds to stress, where we tend to kind of go based upon our blood type diet, and again, going based upon our ancestry. So let's, we think about the O blood type individual who is a hunter-gatherer, and think about if they're stressed, what would they be apt to go for? Because in stress, we have the fight or flight, and there's a few more that they've recognized over the years on how we respond to stress. There's fight, flight, or freeze. Then there's fiend and fawn that are also have been found in the way we've adapted over time to stress, because our stress has changed over time. So fight, flight, or freeze were probably the 3 main beginners of it, and then fawn and fiend has become new ones, adaptations to stress, because our stress is not the same as it used to be, where you're going to fight a bear, or you got to run away from a bear, or play dead, in those original survival responses. So fawn and fiend are new ones. Fawn is to placate somebody, to give them what they want, be sweet, try to keep everything okay before they try to come at you. Or fiend is to just kind of keep things stirred up, because you're like, I'm just used to having something going on all the time, so I'm just going to keep stuff going on all the time. And so that's another stress response. But the main, could say body responses are fight, flight, or freeze. And so if we think about a hunter-gatherer, those types of individuals are going to be more of a fight type because they're hunting and they're gathering. So hunting, they've got to be more aggressive. So most of your O-blood type people tend to be a bit more aggressive when they're stressed. So they're going to be the ones that's going to want to fight you. And so they have to have something. So if you're going to fight, what tends to be you could say the stress molecule that rises up, it's adrenaline. And so he talks about the adrenaline response in O-blood type peoples, because they got to run things down. They got to be, fierce to take down the bear or whatever it is they're hunting, And so they have an issue where their adrenaline doesn't necessarily burn off as quickly as most other individuals when the stress has dropped. And so those individuals, to be able to burn off adrenaline, you got to do what adrenaline is there for you to do. Run or fight. So they have to do more aggressive type exercises to really help burn off the stress of the adrenaline rushes that they tend to have. And then they become adrenaline junkies sometimes too. So they might be the ones that you're like, why are you going and doing that? That's what I know. They kind of have that take on it. So they're the more type of aggressive individuals who need to do things like running, CrossFit, mountain climbing, you name it. That's probably their gig. And I will tell you for myself, I am a running addict, I could say. I love to run, and I fell in love with CrossFit too, and I was amazing when I was able to do that as off as I like. Unfortunately, right now, being in school, it's kind of tapered me off on being able to be a little overboard on it, but I love those type of activities. Now, the A-blood type individuals, they're the farmer fishermen. They're the kind of the ones that created communities. They civilized, kind of civilization was formed by the farmers and the fishermen. They were more calm individuals. And you can think of those individuals as more of the flight type individuals. They're not there that's going to be as aggressive, because aggressive behavior is not going to bring community so much. And so they're ones that want to make people happy. So they're also probably more the people in the more modern response of fawning. So they want to make sure that we have community, we have conversation, we don't want to cause the turmoil. And again, and you look at what they're doing. They're farming and they're fishing. Fishermen, just out there and they're throwing the thing and reeling it in. I mean, there's some more aggressive fishing out there, go deep sea fishing and so forth. It can get a little aggressive on those bigger fishing game. And then, you're out there hoeing and, it's a more laid back type activity for their way of life. And so those type of individuals require a lower intensity activity or exercise. And think about it, with a farmer, they're going to have to go through times of long and, you could say, not aggressive stress, but long-term stress. Think about famine, droughts, things like that, where they have to kind of make it through a long season. That's cortisol. That's the cortisol stress response. So these individuals have a cortisol response that tends to linger on. And that means we have to do things that burn off cortisol, and that's a whole different ballgame than adrenaline. So we have to make the body feel safe and not under threat of the environment or somebody coming down on us to take over our farm or whatever it might be. So A-type individuals are those that have to work with the cortisol. And so they do better with exercise that is more like yoga and Pilates and Tai Chi and Qigong and, maybe some calisthenics, things that are more calming to the system and lower intensity. So we want to keep like the heart rate around 60% of the max heart rate and things like that. And I will tell you, this was when I saw this in action working with a client about a year or so ago, as I started into health coaching. And it was, this person was coming in trying to lose weight, and she was doing Orange Theory or something like CrossFit, some kind of high intensity exercise. And I found out that she was, a farmer fisherman, A blood type individual, and she wasn't losing any weight. And I got to thinking, I was like, I think maybe we should try to back off a little bit. Let's, how about do that maybe once or twice a week and watch your heart rate, keep it within the zone of, about 67% of your max heart rate. And so she's like, okay. She's like, I really enjoy doing this. And I said, that's great, but I don't know that your body does, because you're stagnating. You're not going anywhere with your weight, and you're doing so much. And I said, just from, from my reading and so forth, I'd like to see, if this would help. And so she did that for a week. And the next week she lost like 5 pounds of weight. And her eyes just got really big. I got kind of surprised too to see that big of a weight loss just by reducing the intensity of her exercise. Her body was able to shut down the cortisol response, because cortisol can to install weight loss because it causes a reduction in TSH production, and it tries to conserve where it can. And so it thinks it's stress. When we overdo it with an A blood type in this kind of condition, that's what ends up happening. And that's what he kind of talks about, is their system gets too stressed out with high intensity. And so it creates that cortisol response, which can dampen the metabolism. By turning it down, by reducing TSH, which can make you what's known as subclinical hyperthyroid. And then you're wondering, why am I doing all this work and I'm not seeing a pound come off? And so that's kind of what we have to recognize, is that, we have to pull back a bit on these things and recognize that everybody's metabolisms are different. How they respond to our workouts are different, because fitness is a stressor. It's a physical stressor to the body. And so if we overstress the body, it can actually be detrimental to our goals. And so that was kind of what he kind of instigates here or talks about under that. So B blood type individuals, they're the thinkers. That's what he says, because they were, kind of like the Magi. They were out on the prairies, they, herding and keeping care of the herd. So they, were always kind of stargazers. So they used a lot of mental thinking while they were out there. And so for them, they do have more of a cortisol response because of the type of work that they were in as well. But they could have some issues, with adrenaline too, because, they, the lions and the tigers and bears that come after their flocks could be a problem. So they're kind of in a limbo, which one they actually lean towards. But they're thinkers, and so they have to have something that challenges their mind along with their body when they do working out. And their response to stress tends to be, like I said, it could be somewhere in between, but it also could be in a freeze state, because it has to make sense to them. They have to make sure that they have a sense to what they're going to do or to what's going on. So that sometimes the brain can make you freeze because it doesn't give you the right movement forward. But again, they may have more of the cortisol response, and so they have to do, their exercise has to make sense to them. They're not going to be like us O blood type people and go out and run for no reason. It's got to make some sense to them. So they actually thrive on more of the mind-body exercises like martial arts, qigong, things like that, that's going to incorporate some of that meditation with the body movement, the breath and the mind and the body coming together. They tend to thrive on those types of exercises, he mentions in the book Live Right for Your Type. And then the ABs are kind of a combination of the A and the B, but they also tend to have a lean towards adrenaline. And so those ones, I always say the ABs, they're always so tricky. And I've seen a lot with them as being very particular with theirs. Their digestion's a little bit tricky because, again, it's two different kind of looks, because the food for a B blood type individual is kind of more towards an O, because they're out on the land, what they could get there, but they have the ability to do dairy, unlike the O's. They can, they're not too great with grains, but they can handle grains just a smidge more than an O. And, but they're not too great with poultry, because poultry wasn't really readily available to them out there with the herds. They mostly ate what was available to them from their herds. So they're more of the red meat, or maybe if there was, creeks, they could do some fish, but that's the B for food. So it's a little bit different from an A. So you put the A and the B together and you've got somebody that's somewhere in between, and it's figuring out where do they lean in their needs. And so they're a little bit trickier, both in figuring out their nutrition and stuff, but he does have his suggestions based upon his research for those AB people. But personally, working with individuals, I have found it to be a little tricky on those guys. But it's very doable because we learn to listen to our bodies, and that's the great thing about what I've learned from these two books is listening to the body, understanding that we are all individuals and have to understand that we're made up of generations of different blood groups, different genetics, and so we have a good guideline based upon this information to give us a good starting point, and that way we can actually build a great nutrition, fitness, and stress management plan for health and well-being. And I tell you from my own experience, it was night and day how I felt. I had a wonderful 30s after I found this diet and was able to actually utilize the information from it. And that's why I went back to school for nutrition, and now I'm on into natural medicine and Chinese medicine to learn and glean even more information, because like I said, he was a naturopathic physician, so it kind of introduced me to a different way of looking at health and wellness. And most of my research in school, because I wanted to know why this worked, was on this diet and the science that was behind it. So that is Eat Right for Your Type and Live Right for Your Type. So if you ever want to check them out, you can find them on Amazon and on Barnes & Nobles are two great sources that have these books available. You can also check out his website. I believe it's eatrightforyourtype.com. And he has his information there. If you don't want to have the whole full book, he actually has them in the smaller book version. So you just have, you can put it in your purse and take it with you. You can download his app. He's got an app for $3.99 that has kind of the basic information of each of the blood types and their lists. You can make shopping lists on there. And if you have, say, your spouse and you are of two different blood types, you can actually create a family. And it'll kind of show you the common foods that you both can eat. So that way you can share meals that you both will thrive on. And then, make meals separately for times you're not together, where you can both get the foods that are better for each of you that you maybe aren't able to eat at the same time. So these are, again, my first reviews for you. Like I said, these are ones I really recommend. If you only want to do one, I really suggest this one. Of the two, this is my favorite because it has the food in there, but it also has the fitness and the stress management, which is where I dwell as a health coach. I call it the foundations of health because these are the areas that we support our health. It's 80% of your health is in these three realms, and this book kind of touches on each of those and helps you to know how to start building your nutrition, fitness, and stress management so you can have a better health and wellness over time. So if you have any questions, I'd love to see them, or any comments in the chat, and I hope to see you at the next session.